On February 20th, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi placed a phone call to his Russian counterpart Sergey Lavrov, briefing Moscow on the outcome of the second round of nuclear negotiations with the United States held 3 days earlier in Geneva. According to the Russian Foreign Ministry, the call was initiated by the Iranian side. The two ministers exchanged views on the current situation surrounding Iran's nuclear program, taking into account what the ministry described as the outcomes of the indirect U.S.-Iranian contacts in Geneva. During the call, Araghchi told Lavrov that Iran remains serious about reaching what he described as a fair and balanced agreement with the United States, one that respects Tehran's rights and interests under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. According to Press TV, Araghchi also commended what he called Russia's constructive and positive stance in international forums regarding Iran's nuclear file. The Russian Foreign Ministry confirmed that Moscow reiterated its support for a negotiation process aimed at finding fair political and diplomatic solutions while respecting Iran's legitimate rights under the NPT. The phone call came after the second round of indirect nuclear talks between Iran and the United States, held in Geneva on February 17th. According to Al Jazeera, the negotiators spent approximately 3.5 hours at the table. Araghchi told Iranian state television afterward that the sides had reached a broad agreement on guiding principles, on the basis of which they would begin working on the text of a potential deal. Omani Foreign Minister Bandar Abbas, who mediated the session, said the talks ended with what he described as good progress. Washington's assessment of the Geneva round was more measured. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters that some progress had been made, but that the two sides remain far apart on key issues. Vice President J.D. Vance said there were clearly red lines that Iran had not yet acknowledged, though he did not specify which ones publicly. According to Axios, the Iranians offered to return within 2 weeks with detailed proposals to address what U.S. officials described as open gaps in the negotiating positions. On the same day he called Lavrov, Araghchi appeared on American television and made a notable claim. Speaking to MSNBC, the Iranian foreign minister said Tehran was planning to finalize a draft deal and send it to Washington within the next 2 to 3 days, according to the Associated Press. He added that serious negotiations on the text could begin within a week and potentially reach a conclusion shortly after. Araghchi also stated that the American side had not asked for zero enrichment of uranium during the talks, a claim that appeared to contradict what U.S. officials have said publicly about their negotiating position. A White House official, speaking on condition of anonymity, pushed back on Araghchi's characterization. According to the Associated Press, the official said President Trump has been clear that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons or the capacity to build them and cannot enrich uranium. The gap between Araghchi's public statements and Washington's official position suggests the two sides may be interpreting the Geneva guiding principles differently, which could complicate the drafting process. Araghchi also used his media appearances to project a dual message. In an earlier interview with CNN, he said Tehran was confident a deal could be achieved and warned that military aggression would be a disaster for the entire region. He insisted that Iran's missile arsenal and regional allies should not be part of the negotiations, telling CNN the focus must remain on the nuclear program alone. On MSNBC, Araghchi struck a harder tone, saying Iran is prepared for diplomacy as much as it is prepared for war. According to Al Jazeera, he described the U.S. military buildup as unnecessary and unhelpful. The Araghchi-Lavrov phone call did not occur in isolation. 2 days earlier, on February 18th, Lavrov had issued one of Moscow's most direct warnings to Washington on the Iran standoff. In an interview with Saudi Arabia's Al Arabiya television, published on the Russian Foreign Ministry's website, Lavrov said that previous strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, sites monitored by the International Atomic Energy Agency, had already posed real risks of triggering a nuclear incident. According to Reuters, Lavrov stated that everyone in the region understands this is, in his words, playing with fire, and urged all parties to pursue restraint. In the same interview, Lavrov addressed signals from regional capitals. According to Reuters, he said Arab countries and Gulf monarchies were sending clear messages calling on Washington to exercise restraint and to find an agreement that would not infringe on Iran's lawful rights while guaranteeing a purely peaceful nuclear enrichment program. Lavrov cautioned that renewed confrontation could undo the diplomatic gains of recent years, including the improved relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia. He added that Moscow had no reason to doubt that Iran sincerely wants to resolve the issue within the framework of the NPT. The diplomatic alignment between Moscow and Tehran was also accompanied by visible military coordination. On February 19th, 1 day before the Araghchi-Lavrov call, Iranian and Russian naval forces launched joint exercises in the Sea of Oman and the northern Indian Ocean. According to the Moscow Times, the Russian corvette Stoikiy, a Stoikiy-class warship, had docked at Iran's naval base in Bandar Abbas ahead of the drills. The exercises involved a simulated rescue of a hijacked vessel, with Iranian and Russian special forces carrying out a combined heliborne and surface assault, according to Press TV. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters the exercises had been planned and agreed upon in advance, according to the National. However, analysts have noted that the timing of the drills, conducted in the same waters where the United States has been concentrating naval assets, sent a signal that was difficult to separate from the broader standoff. Russia's Security Council Secretary Nikolai Patrushev stated earlier in the week that Russian, Iranian, and Chinese warships had been dispatched to the Strait of Hormuz for the Maritime Security Belt 2026 exercises, which he described as relevant to the current geopolitical moment. The Russian-Iranian coordination unfolded against an accelerating timeline set by Washington. On February 20th, President Trump told reporters that he was considering limited military strikes against Iran, according to the Associated Press. Trump said it would become clear over the next 10 to 15 days whether a meaningful deal is possible, warning that bad things would happen if one is not reached. A few hours later, he told reporters that Iran had better negotiate a fair deal. The statement aligned with earlier reporting by the Wall Street Journal, which said the proposed operation would stop short of a full-scale assault that could trigger a major Iranian military response. Trump also renewed his criticism of Iran's human rights record. Speaking to reporters at the White House, Trump accused the Iranian regime of killing 32,000 people during the crackdown on anti-government protests that erupted in January. That figure is far above other reported estimates and has not been independently verified by major wire services. Death toll estimates from the protests vary widely by source, ranging from approximately 3,100 cited by Iranian government figures to over 7,000 documented by the human rights activist news agency, with a United Nations special rapporteur suggesting the toll could surpass 20,000. Trump further claimed that 837 protesters had been scheduled for execution and that his direct threat to bomb Iran if any hangings took place had prevented them from being carried out. According to CBS News, Trump made similar claims during a January interview, saying he had taken what he called very strong actions. The specific figure of 837 has not been confirmed through the mainstream reporting reviewed at the time of recording, and it remains unclear what source the claim is based on. The military dimension of the standoff continues to intensify. According to multiple outlets, including the Associated Press, the USS Gerald R. Ford carrier strike group passed through the Strait of Gibraltar on February 21st and entered the Mediterranean Sea, the latest step in the most significant U.S. military buildup in the Middle East in recent years. A carrier strike group led by the USS Abraham Lincoln has been positioned in the Arabian Sea since late January. According to a senior U.S. official cited by Reuters, all forces deployed to the region are expected to be in place by mid-March. CNN reported on February 18th that the White House had been briefed and that U.S. forces could be ready to strike Iran as early as the weekend, though any operation would require presidential authorization. Separately, Axios reported that sources familiar with the planning described the potential operation not as a targeted strike, but as a weeks-long campaign. A characterization that, if accurate, would suggest a broader scope than what the Wall Street Journal initially described. Trump has not publicly confirmed whether he has made a final decision. According to a CNN analysis citing satellite imagery reviewed by the James Martin Center for Non-Proliferation Studies, Iran appears to be rebuilding missile infrastructure damaged during last year's conflict with Israel. Analyst Sam Lair told CNN that imagery of the Imam Ali missile base near Khorramabad, dated January 5th, showed 3 structures rebuilt, 1 repaired, and 3 more under construction. Tabriz Air Base and Hamadan Air Base also appear largely restored, with runways repaired and aircraft shelters rebuilt, though the exact operational status of these facilities cannot be independently confirmed from imagery alone. Separately, the Institute for Science and International Security, led by analyst David Albright, reported that February 10th satellite imagery of the Natanz enrichment complex showed signs of hardening at tunnel entrances to the Pickaxe Mountain facility. The same analysis identified what appeared to be a completed concrete sarcophagus structure at the Taligan 2 site near Parchin. These reconstruction and hardening efforts, if confirmed, suggest Tehran is preparing its nuclear and missile infrastructure for the possibility that diplomacy fails and military confrontation resumes. The sequence of events across February 17th through 21st reveals a layered Iranian strategy. On one track, Araghchi engaged with American negotiators in Geneva and then made public claims of progress on American television. On a parallel track, he called Lavrov to brief Moscow and secure Russia's continued diplomatic backing. At the same time, Iranian and Russian forces conducted joint naval drills in waters where U.S. assets are concentrating. Araghchi told CNN that Iranians are proud people who only respond to the language of respect, adding that no previous American administration had succeeded in compelling Tehran through coercion. For Moscow, the phone call, the public warning, and the naval exercises together represent a coordinated signal to Washington. Russia is positioning itself not as a neutral mediator, but as an active diplomatic supporter of Iran's negotiating position, while its military presence in the same waters where U.S. forces are building up introduces an additional layer of strategic complexity. Whether that backing is enough to shift Washington's calculus, or whether the 10 to 15-day window Trump has set will close without a deal, remains the defining question of this standoff.